Motherhood. 1 minute, you're mom of the year.
I love you, Mommy.
Then the next, not so much. From bath time to bullying, from potty training to puberty, parenting is full of challenges. But one thing is for certain, you are not alone. Welcome to Modern Mom Probs. I'm your host, author, mother, parenting expert, Tara Clark. Join me while we tackle today's modern mom problems. Hello and welcome to another episode of Modern Mom Probs Live. I'm your host, Tara Clark. I'm sitting in a different spot today than I normally sit. I'm usually in my desk, but I felt like mixing it up a little bit. So today we're going to be talking about how to make mom friends. And if you're a mom, you may know what I'm talking about. I'm about to bring on Katie Mulvaney, my BFF since we were in kindergarten, and she and I have never had a problem making friends with each other. Let's bring on Katie. And there she is. Hey, oh, look at you with the fireplace.
I want to sit by the fire, and I was like, yes, because it's Fireside. So
yes, you know what? Now that you say that, I didn't even think about it. I actually have a fireplace right here. I'm not joking. It's literally, I'm looking right at it. And next time, I'm going to do it by my fireplace, and I think that we should always do it by the fire.
I love it. It's brilliant because like I'm warm and having fun, at the same time.
You're killing two birds with one stone. I love it. All right, next time I'm totally going to be by the fire. Okay, so as I mentioned before, and I feel like we've spoken about this several times on the show, you and I have been friends since kindergarten, which is bananas.
Yes. It's a long time. Absolutely.
It's a long time.
I have a theory that I want to talk about that plays into this a little bit further to our discussion.
Good.
But my thing is very few people are lucky enough to make friends when they're 4 or 5 years old and still be friends with them, 30 something years later. So, right. Honestly, it's like a blessing, I talk about things about from when I was 8 years old, and you're like, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. You're like, I remember when we were doing those things in third grade, or when the Challenger exploded. I remember those things because we were together.
When that happened.
Okay, so you're a mother now, I'm a mother now. We are no longer in kindergarten or school ourselves. How do you go about making mom friends?
It's an interesting situation for me, right? Because I'm a very outgoing person. I want to be friends with everybody. One of my things that I do for my job is we do these screenings where someone has to sit with you for 8 minutes while they wait for their results for their blood test. And I love it because someone's trapped and has to talk to me. Right?
I love that. You're going to be my friend right now.
Exactly. So I'm an extrovert. And I think for me, the hardest part is knowing when someone else wants to be friends or talk or doesn't, you know what I mean? Sometimes I'll see the mom at the park who's just on her phone. I'm like, is this her quiet time? Should I just let her be? I actually kind of know who she is, and I know our kids are going to be in school together. Should we Yeah,
no, that's always a delicate thing too, because it's you want to respect someone's privacy, and like you said, maybe that's her alone me time, maybe she's focusing on that, and more power to her. But at the same time, it's I'm sure you would love to spark up a conversation and be oh, I think maybe our kids are going to be together in kindergarten next year, to sort of foster that relationship, right?
Absolutely, right. And then, you see all these memes and reels and everything also about how you want to just relax at the park, and then you see that mom making eye contact they want to be friends, and you look the other way, and I'm oh gosh, that's me.
I know, me too. But I feel bad because okay, so it goes both ways, and it depends on the day too. It's not every day 100% of the time, but there are some days where you're feeling chatty and you are the mom that is going out of her way to want to make friends. Or there's another day maybe you had a rough day, and maybe you really would rather not share your soul with and make small talk with somebody at the playground, right? So I could see it both ways, but on the whole, I'm probably the one who is going up to people and chatting more than I'm not.
Me too. That's why we're
the same. Why do you think it's so hard to make mom friends?
Honestly, I think for me, I try to think about the scope of friendship, right? And so when you're younger and you're making friends in school, and works out, and this is where I said it's going to play in later. What I was going to say is like some people are very lucky to make lifelong friends when they're 5 or whatever, right? But like we make these friends, and then maybe we go off to college, and then there's more diversity, like more people like you maybe, and it's like a little easier to make friends, and you find all that stuff. But then I think when you come back to being a mom and you're back to like that town mentality, it's like worse now because now you don't even necessarily want to make the friends, right? You know what I mean?
No,
like,
it's true because and I think because you already have established friends of your own, right? Like, so if you're doing dinner with the same, like, let's say you do dinner with the same couple or something, the same family often, you're like, why am I going to have to go like try to make new friends when I feel so comfortable with the people I already have?
Right. And it's like you're making a friend based on like, okay, like our kids are best friends. Should we be best friends? It's like Step Brothers, right? But it's like, did we just become best friends? That's more me, of course, because I'm like, we should be best friends because they're best friends, right? But like, not everyone's there. And you're not on the same page as everyone as you get older, right? And you're a little bit more set in like what you like and what you don't like and all that stuff. So I think that's where it kind of gets tricky, is that like it's even more forced than when you were growing up. You know what I mean? It's like it's very forced. So it kind of just comes down to like whether or not all parties involved do want to make new friends.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is sort of like everyone has to be on the same like level playing field there, or like you want to make friends more than they do, and then maybe you're not. It's hard to meet in the middle, if that makes sense. Right. And then, like you said,
right. And you don't want to be like the desperate one, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be desperate. Like I can hang up on myself. But like going back to what you were saying about like it being really forced, like that does happen many times with like play groups, right? Like let's say when you have a toddler or a baby, like you're in a play group and all the moms have the same 18-month-old, and like now you're forced to talk about nothing but mom things, 18-year-old things, and like it is sort of limiting because you are more than just the mother to an 8-month-old.
Agreed. And I actually think part of me feels like it's almost easier when you both have very young children, because that's your life at that point, right? Like that's what you want to talk about, and you want to relate. Like, is that what's going on with you? I think as long as you don't get competitive with it, like, well, my child's walking already. Like, you don't want to be like that.
Yeah. Like, there's a very fine line of like asking people for advice and camaraderie and like genuinely like being concerned about certain thing, and then the competition that can sometimes creep in where, like you said, like, oh, my baby's walking already. Mine has slept through the night from the day she came home from the hospital. Like, there's a fine line between competition and camaraderie, especially in those groups. At least that's the way I found it when my son was a baby.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to be cognizant as a mom to like not, like there's certain things my kids are great at. There's things that they're not great at. I'm not sitting here bragging, but like, when there is something that they're great at that comes up, I'm not going to sit here and be like you said, like, oh, well, my kids sleep through the night. Like, I'll be like people will be like, oh, how do you potty train a kid? I'm like, their teacher did it. I really have no idea.
Good for her. She deserved a tip for that.
Right, exactly. But it's just fun. Like, that's how it is. Like, I don't try and be like, oh, it's because I'm doing such a great job parenting that my kids are doing this, and be like, yeah, I just got lucky. Like, this is how it is.
I have a good village, like the teacher who can help us potty train, or the different things that go into it. But you're right. That is definitely, competition is a very big part of that, which is not necessarily something that you had before, like you had with friends before you had kids. Does that make sense? Like, I never felt like a competition with friends, like from work or from school or something like that.
Right. And if you did, like, you probably just walked away from it. We're like, okay. But, right,
Yeah.
like, it was never a big thing. And, I mean, I guess it comes with, like, being a mom and being proud of your kids, I guess.
Of course. And I mean, like, our kids are our whole life, right? So, like, it's hard not to be, so involved and so concerned about those things. But, it could be tricky sometimes when there's, like, outside forces where you sort of feel the pressure from your social circles.
Right, exactly. And like, you got to think of it like, okay, there's 5 people in this play group, 5 kids, like someone's going to be the last one to walk, right? It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It doesn't mean that there's something you should be doing differently. And I think it's kind of important to keep that in mind when you're trying to make friends or anything like that as well.
Absolutely. Is there something that you look for? Because you have 2 smaller children. So is there anything that you look for when you're meeting a new mom friend?
Honestly, I would say that what I look for is someone who's a little bit more, like, who can joke about it and, like, be laid back and not take it too seriously. I think if I had to say, like, my ideal friend, it doesn't have to be that we're, like, everything's the same, everything's perfect, but it's someone who you can just be like, oh, I'm having this problem, and they'll be like, oh, like, I get that, or like, that's not the problem I'm having, but I could see where, that is difficult. Maybe you could try this. Like, people who aren't like, we don't have that problem.
Yeah. It's always so sticky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's always such a sticky thing. And then you're sort of backtracking then to come up with some sort of response to that,
right.
Whatever that is.
Right. Exactly.
I agree. And I think that's so important when you're looking at mom friends, that where you could be yourself, and you could be yourself as Tara and Katie, who are individuals in as well as, someone's mom, right? So that they're not just seeing you as that. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is true, and you'll find this as your kids grow up and go to school, there were people who you put the kids together in preschool and they're okay, they're in the same, fours class together, and then they become fast friends. So then you become fast friends with the mom. But then sometimes the kids stop getting along, or they sort of grow apart and they go into other spaces. And it's awkward then with that parent, because it's you like her as a person, but then you can't put the kids together necessarily. And if you do, they don't have a good time. And so that's a whole other thing to navigate, that I didn't know I was going to have to navigate that until I did.
That's funny you say that, because I actually haven't even considered that at this point. I'm just yeah.
That's what I'm saying, because your kids are younger. You haven't been through the school age. It will happen. It happened to us in nursery school. There was a son. My son loved him. He had a friend. They were best friends. I made fast friends with the mom, and we would hang out all the time. And then her son started relentlessly bullying my son, would say these things to him that you couldn't even imagine a 4-year-old saying. So I don't even know where he was getting the stuff that he was saying to my son. And so then that obviously drove a wedge through our relationship, because my son didn't want to hang out with him anymore. Anytime we did, we would try to go to a fair or something like that. It was always just a disaster. And so then eventually, we just drifted apart, and then they ended up moving. But it's always an awkward thing, and so that unfortunately does happen when your kids are in school. My son had a great kindergarten class, and that was our first year in the elementary school. And I made very good friends with most of the moms in his kindergarten class. And those are still, for the most part, my core group of mom friends at his elementary school, were the moms that we all traveled with in kindergarten.
Great. Yeah.
And of course, my son doesn't hang out with every single one of those kids anymore, but for the most part, yes, we still see them, and they have play dates together and stuff like that. But it's interesting how the kindergarten class was a pretty core group. And I'm curious to see if that's the case, with other people's situations too.
Absolutely. I wonder, and you're saying that, and I wonder if it's kind of what we said earlier in the conversation is make friends with all the moms in kindergarten, but know that they're not all going to be friends still in 2, 4, 6 years, right? And be okay with it, unless there's an active bullying situation. Obviously that's a different story, but to be still cool with someone, you see them, you run into them at the grocery store or whatever, your kids don't have to be best friends, right? It's just kind of good to have that connection, at least someone to call when you're wait, is tomorrow a theme day at school?
Yes. Those are the moms you always need. You need the moms who can be your emergency contact, because you need an emergency contact. You need a mom that you could call and be is tomorrow, pajama day, Or do I need to pick up X, Y, and Z? Like, you need the mom friends when your kids are in school. Like I said, and like you said, like they don't have to be your best friend. They don't have to be there, sleeping over your house or something like that. But you do need a good couple go-to responsible friends to help you out.
This episode is brought to you by Modern Mom Style Box. Upgrade your wardrobe and enjoy unlimited styles for just $60 a month. Modern Mom Style Box is the first rental clothing subscription designed exclusively for moms and moms-to-be. Get started today with a free trial. Use promo code PTO.
Absolutely. Yeah. And maybe that's the key, and like, I feel like this is great advice for me moving forward, like take it with a grain of salt. Like you can be civil and cool and like, you can be friends without your kids being super tight. You know what I mean? It's even possible like your kids go to bed and like you just get along with the mom. Like maybe, you go out for drinks or something after where they go to bed instead of like having to get together as a group. But it's nice to have that support emotionally and someone who's going through the same period of motherhood as you are.
Yeah. It's so important. My one good friend, Kelly, she likes to do crafts. And so one time she had me over. She keeps wanting to do craft projects, but we don't always end up like getting into them. But one time we did. It was around Christmas time. Our boys were playing and she and I sat at the kitchen table and we made crafts and we had so much fun. We made these little gnomes with, I think like the beard was like the head of a mop. So it was like yarny. And then we used a sock for his hat. And it was like the cutest little thing. It was one of those gnomes that had like a hat, I don't know. It was cute. Anyway, my point is like, it's great to have moms to do fun stuff with that make you feel alive and not just like as someone who's like wiping butts and doing school pickup.
Absolutely. Right. I mean, I'm learning so much from this conversation because now I'm thinking like, it's good to have the friend that's like, you're just kind of in the same place and like maybe you make friends and it's like separate from your kids. It's not necessarily because your kids are friends. And like, yeah, it's nice to be civil with your kid's best friend's mom, but you're not always going to be like, you can't take any person and force them into a friend. I mean, I can. I like to force them.
I know. You and I can try to. That's sort of how I do it. Because seriously, my one friend, the one that I'd made the craft with, I like spotted her in like the third day of kindergarten and I was like, I'm going to make her my friend. And that was it. You're going to be my friend.
Yeah, exactly. And I know for me, like, so neither of us live where we grew up, right? So it's not like we know a ton of people in town when you moved into this town. And I mean, this is your way to kind of meet people. I mean, for me, especially, it's kind of rural where I live, I guess. So it's like, you don't really have that like place everyone meets up and like has a drink on Friday night or whatever. So like that's really where you make your friends is through the kids, through the school, like how you get to know people in town. So yeah, I mean, I guess you just gotta take it one step at a time, right?
Yeah, you really do. Wait till your kids get into elementary school. That will really be the hub for all of those things, whether you're like going to the book fair or their field trips or whatever it is. So you'll see like when they're there, like that's really where like it just becomes like, it just explodes from there. It explodes. It just explodes from there. Okay, so let me ask you this one question. Okay. So we talked about like what to look for in a friend and like why is it so difficult? What are some red flags when you do meet a mom at the playground or from daycare? Like what are some red flags you're like, I don't know if this is the right one for me?
Wow, that's a good question. I would say probably like we've mentioned it before, but I think that competitiveness for me is like a big red flag. Like I don't have time in my life for that. I'm not a competitive person. I just want to, have a nice conversation or, like meet a friend. Like I'm not looking to be like, well, here are all the reasons my kid's better than yours. So I think for me, like my biggest red flag is being competitive and also the mom who like just doesn't really seem into it at all. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know if that's necessarily like a red flag, but I don't need to be like obsessed. The only thing we talk about is our kids, but also I do want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Like you love them, you spend time with them, you want other people to hear about how awesome they are because you think they're awesome. So you want other people to know how awesome they are.
Right. And I want to know, like, are you going through the same stuff I'm going through? Is this what your experience is? Like, I'm just always curious of that kind of stuff. So is it a red flag or just like not my favorite, I guess is what it comes down to.
Right. That makes sense. I agree with you totally about the, maybe people who don't necessarily want to be friends with you, not you personally, but I'm saying like people that aren't really into making a new friendship or the competitiveness. But you know what I think is a really big one too? Like people who are gossipy and then like, well, you'll see that more, like I said, when you like go into elementary school and there's just like a lot more people involved. That's really tricky because then it's like this one's like pitting against that one and this one. And like that just gets really ugly. And I have no time for any of that nonsense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't hit that point yet, but I could see that being like, yeah.
Yeah. It happens, like I said, I feel like when you add more personalities into the mix, that's when that stuff sort of happens. It didn't really happen like when my son was in preschool, nursery school, anything like that. It was really more elementary school hit. And I was like, oh gosh, this is what we're doing again? What am I in high school? Like what's going on here?
I thought I had evolved past this. Oh yeah.
Right. I really did. I was like, I'm a 40-year-old lady. Like I got no time for this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I could see that being another good one for sure. I appreciate that. I think too, like, speaking of like what I've heard, because, I'm an older mom, my kids are younger and I'm 42, but like a lot of my cousins and my like siblings and stuff, like their kids, they say like once you get to like right before high school, like the competition gets like out of hand because everyone's trying to get into college now and like it gets even like, well, my daughter plays on 5 different teams and she's won 6 awards and blah, blah, blah. So we think we're going to apply to this school. And you're like, well, she's 12. Like,
simmer down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, that's something else to look forward to in the future. But it's kind of along the same lines as you said, where like when you're good friends with, like your kids are good friends and then they aren't. And I feel like it's kind of like along the same lines where you're like, oh no, like, I think my kids are great, but like I'm really not looking for this conversation at all, right?
Yeah. I mean, that happens. Like there are definitely some moms that I've met who it's very clear that they already have their established mom friends and mom group. And those tend to be moms of older children. And so like their child, my age, like my son's age, like is their youngest. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So like if it's like let's just say like a second or a third child or something like that, by this time they're like, yeah, no, we've been there, we've done that. Like we have like our established like mom friends who like, maybe those kids are in high school now or something like that. But I've definitely run into that. And it's not that they're mean, it's just like you could just tell that they don't want to be bothered.
They're not in the same place as you in motherhood.
That's what it is. I mean, you're right. That's what it is. It's like they've done 4th grade 3 or 4 times. So they don't need to be concerned about your 4th grade problems right now.
Exactly. Yeah, I guess that's a good point. Like, are you just interested in like your first couple kids? Not that you're not interested in them, but like, you're like more curious about like everyone else's experience, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. And so I think it's important for us to like have this conversation, whereas like, I like to consider myself a veteran parent, right? And so I like to like impart my wisdom onto you or my experience that I've seen in the last, gosh, I mean, he's been in elementary school now for like 4 years, right? Or 5 years. So like, it's 5 years of experience of elementary school that I'm bequeathing to you. So take my advice about mom friends there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that for sure. I don't know what to expect. Like now it's just running into people here and there, like meeting on Facebook. But yeah, I don't know what's going to happen when I'm like mainstream mom friending.
Yeah. Well, wait, we didn't even talk. We have 5 minutes to go. We didn't even talk about digital friends. Now we got to backtrack. You said about Facebook groups. What do you think about meeting friends online or having like meetups or, meeting people through Facebook?
I have not had a problem with it yet. I mean, we have like the town page and I've put something up here or there. I know a couple of their moms have. And the friends that my kids do have in town, that's how they met them, is we met on Facebook or the Facebook group and we were like, oh, do you want to get together at the park or something like that? So honestly, at this point in my motherhood journey, I have no problem with it. I don't know where it goes from here. There's going to be like more problems, of course. But yeah, I mean, right now, I think it's actually extremely helpful. Like, if there's anyone listening that has like 2-3-year-olds, like you don't have to put a lot of information on there and just putting up something on the town page. Like anyone else have like 2 or 3-year-old kids that wants to get together at the playground. It's really, if you don't have the mom friends in town, I think it's a great way to meet people.
Yeah, I agree. When my son was a toddler, we were living in New York City, and I say this all the time, but maybe not on this show, but I say this all the time, is that we did not have a lot of friends. We lived in one of the biggest cities in the world, and it was really just the two of us. He and I just like went to the park every day by ourselves, and like occasionally we would meet up with people. And part of the special thing about living in New York City is like we would make new friends every day. We would never see them again after that, but we would make new friends every day. And occasionally you would still kind of sort of see the same people, but very rarely did we ever exchange numbers with anyone. Very rarely did we ever have like meetups necessarily. I only really learned about those Facebook group meetups sort of like after the fact and when he was a little bit older. And I wish that I would have known, because I think that would have been really helpful to make some friends that were going through the same thing that we were going through at the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think for me, like my biggest source of mom friends right now is the daycare that my kids go to. But I mean, it's kind of far away from our house because it's through my work. So that's why I'm trying to like, for when my son goes to kindergarten next year, like I want him to know a couple kids when he goes in and he's not just, and honestly, I've had great experiences. I think the moms I've met, like, are we going to be best friends forever? I don't know. But like my kids are meeting people. I have someone to chat with about our experiences, and I think it's good. I haven't had a negative experience. I'm sure there are people who have, but I guess I've been lucky with that. So.
That's awesome, though. No, I think that's great. I mean, you know how I feel about digital villages, obviously. So I'm a huge fan, because when I didn't have an actual in-person village, I created my own digital village. And so here we are for that. So I think it's super important for people to be able to share ideas, use platforms, like talk about things that, like I said, that we didn't have. Like I would have loved to have had mom friends to talk about like different sleep things and eating and all of those things that you're concerned about in the first year of life that are like so all consuming, which now there are people talking about this, but 10 years ago, it really was not nearly as prevalent as it is today.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, if you didn't have like your own friends and cousins and whoever, siblings going through the same thing, it's isolating, right? Because like, I mean, even with the digital technology, there was much more validation for me, I'm sure, than there was for you when my kids were little, but it still wasn't that same like, hey, is this what your kid's doing? Is this normal? So, I think being able to meet people that way is a great advantage to the technology that we have, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. You totally hit the nail on the head when you said about motherhood can be isolating, especially early motherhood. New motherhood could be so isolating when you're home with your baby. And obviously with the pandemic, it's so isolating. And so one of my parting thoughts I think that we should say is that friendship is so important. Making connections with people is so important. And so that you know that you're not alone. You know that you're not the only one struggling through X, Y, and Z. It's important to talk to people. It's important to make jokes. It's important to feel inspired and call up your best friend and just laugh about like crazy stuff, which is, how Katie and I are.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we said too, like just taking it with a grain of salt. Not everyone you meet is going to be your best friend. They're not going to replace your own friends or anything like that. But, make them for what they are, and it's a good resource. It's a good friend to have. Definitely. Someone with kids same age as you, right?
Exactly. Absolutely. Katie Mulvaney, I absolutely love you. I'm so glad we started being friends in kindergarten and we've been friends ever since. Thanks for joining us on Modern Mom Probs Live. Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Modern Mom Probs. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive in today's problem with me, your host, Tara Clark. Join me next time when I'll be interviewing another great guest and tackling another modern mom problem. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and a rating. As always, you could head over to Modern Mom Probs on Instagram and give me a follow. Or check out my book, Modern Mom Probs, A Survival Guide for 21st Century Mothers, available online wherever books are sold. Well, that's it for today. See you next time, folks.